Hello everybody. Lovely to have you here today, and it's a great pleasure for the Institute to have our colleague Yasmin joining us. Yasmin is, I suppose, a marketing coach and business strategist. Forgive me, struggling with the big words like marmalade this morning. I suppose she kind of coaches the coaches, if you will, and coaches the consultants, which is very much kind of in our milieu and something that we all need as we progress in our careers. So, Tiny Time for Big Results is her organization. And if there's one kind of cry from the Hebrew slaves that we get a lot, is that thing about time management. It's the one consistent, I suppose, currency that we need to police, to manage, and actually to be able to allocate accordingly. And particularly billable hours is what it's all about in the large practices, and equally in the smaller practices, it's very much about efficiency and use of time. So she helps coaches and consultants create businesses that hopefully will make them rich in both money and time. And hopefully she'll share some deep insights with us today. And equally, if you take two or three tips away, well, then it's time well spent. We're hoping to maybe get a view and some sense about attracting higher value clients, which is what we all aspire to, and that magnetic messaging input that will actually attract them to us in terms of making them stay with us as well. Also, maybe looking at some digital assets that can be wrapped up within that context as well, and also to build simple systems that generate recurring daily sales. So she's been at this for quite a while. She's well known, well recognized, and speaks regularly on this topic. And she's been helping our community of consultants package their brilliance, if you want to call it that, and I suppose and charge really what their work deserves. It's not uncommon. I suppose query that a lot of our members would say is, what actually, should I be charging? So again, she's a best-selling author, and we're really looking forward to hearing what she's been so kind enough to share with us. And I know it's not me you're here to see. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our good colleague Yasmin. And Yasmin, really looking forward to this one. So Aragi Yalat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Patrick. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Really delighted to share this topic with you because it is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. And it's my intention for the next 35, 40 minutes is that you're going to get a really good sense of what it is that you want to have in place in your business that's going to help you to attract and retain those premium clients. And I just want to get straight into it. So really and truly what I want to think about in this session is giving you that roadmap, because I think so many times, and maybe you've had this experience where you've been on a training and you just feel like you're kind of still going, but what do I do? How do I do this? And so one of the things that I love doing is breaking it down and saying, okay, so these are the things. So just similar to what Patrick was saying about, giving you some tips at the end, I was like, I actually have 3 really solid things that you can do as a result of having attended this training. And whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this as a replay, there's a lot of value in what I'm going to be sharing with you. It's going to be about shifting your perspective, but it's also about what tangible, specific things can you do, because that's where we get the results, right? So we're going to be talking about giving you that clear roadmap to attracting those premium clients, getting recognized for your expertise, and retaining the right clients long term as well. And my way of doing this is not having to hustle. I hate that word. Not having to rely on referrals, even though they're a brilliant way of getting business, but not having to rely on them, or doing cold outreach, which I'm sure makes everyone kind of feel a bit shivery at the thought of having to pick up the phone and do cold outreach. The way I like to do business is really in alignment with kind of the way that I want to show up in the world and how I want to rather than kind of thinking like I've got to go out there and get clients. It's like, how can I magnetize them to me? So it's kind of like, think of yourself as a bit of a lighthouse. You're the beacon. It's like, so they can see you and they're kind of like thinking, I need to work with Patrick, I need to work with Una, I need to work with Colin, etc. Okay. So you're in the right place if you're brilliant at what you do. And also, this is no time for false modesty. You know you're brilliant at what you do. So this is really important, but it's not always obvious to the right people, right? You're great with clients, but new ones feel inconsistent or it's just word of mouth only. And whilst that is really useful and powerful, it can feel really out of your control, right? You're ready to attract those higher level clients, but without lowering your pricing or having to chase leads. You want to be seen for your expertise, not just your time. And this is a really important thing for me. I created Tiny Time Big Results back in 2014. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my story in a minute. But this is a really important piece of it, is you want to be seen for your expertise, not just like, oh, I've done this many hours. We're going to shift that way of being valued and recognized. Okay. And you've been doing great work quietly, but now it's time for the right people to find you. So what I would encourage you to do is, if there's anything that's coming to your mind as I'm talking, and I'll probably ask the odd question, so please feel free to use the chat box. If you want to just put any comments in there, and if you have any questions, and I'm sure we've got time for Q&A at the end. But I really kind of, I suppose, for me to kind of get a good understanding of where you all are, like, does this resonate for you? Like, so just give me like a yes in the chat box if you feel like, yes, I absolutely resonate, and maybe with one or two or all of them. And that kind of helps you to kind of go, yeah, I'm actually in the right place. So brilliant. Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay, wonderful. Okay, so this is the truth of it, and this is what I find, and having done this work for 13 plus years now, you're great at what you do. That's a given, right? But leads feel random, you're undercharging, or you feel undervalued, and clients leave after one project. And so that leaves you scrabbling and thinking, where's the next client going to come from? And that's a really insecure place to be. And, in your business, you want to feel like you've got more control over what's actually coming in into your business. So the goal is attracting premium clients, getting noticed for your expertise, and retaining the right clients long term. So you might be thinking, okay, Yasmin, who are you? Why should I listen to you? And so let me just give you that brief introduction, so that you kind of have a sense of kind of where I've come from and what I'm doing right now. So like I said, I created Tiny Time Big Results back in 2014. And what I've done is, at the time, so I've got 3 young children, they're 15, 12, and 9. At that time, I had just had my daughter, and so she was only a few months old, and I had a 3-year-old. And what I discovered was, I don't have a lot of time, as I'm sure if you're a parent, you can relate to this, that you're thinking, I don't have a lot of time. And my challenge was, I had 3 hours for when my son was in the creche. My daughter was always with me. She was always in the house. And when you're faced with that constant like struggle of, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time, I got really fed up of listening to my own whining, to be honest with you. And I just had that moment where I was like, okay, if this is the only time that I do have, if I only have 3 hours a day, how can I make this be profitable? How can I make this business work for me? I'm not one of those, the business gurus are like, oh, you need to work 100 hours to prove, that your business is going to work. I was like, I don't have that. And that's where Tiny Time Big Results really was born. And to begin with, it was very much about time management and productivity. But as time went on, I realized that actually is dealing with like symptoms. And you can learn a new time management method, but it's just like sticking a plaster on a wound. And you actually need to heal what is actually going on in the business. So what I've done is I've created this 20-hour week business method that runs without constant hustle, right? So that if you're thinking, if there's a part of you that's thinking, Yasmin, is this really possible? Hopefully what you'll realize is, in this session, and, if you kind of want to read my book or anything like that, you'll see exactly the things that enable you to have that profitable 20-hour week business. So I help solopreneurs, coaches, consultants, experts turn their brilliance into income. I was in corporate for 12 years before I started my business 13 years ago. My last role was as VP of Training and Leadership Development. And this is what I do. I really help you to build that 20-hour week business. And particularly one of the ways that I do that is by helping you to attract premium clients, because I will say, hand on my heart, that has been the mainstay for my business as I've had babies and raising them, and they're still young, so I'm still raising them. That has been the one thing that has allowed me to do the business and show up for my family, and the business has been premium clients. So like I said, I'm a mum of 3 and proof that simplicity, strategy, and leverage do work. So let's dive straight into it. Okay. Like we said, leads feel random, you're undercharging, clients disappear after one project. So let's talk about this and kind of how we can actually shift this. Okay. Because really and truly, when you think about the consulting landscape, it has changed, right? It has changed. The traditional methods alone aren't enough. If, say, for example, you've been in consulting for a long time and you've been like thinking, well, it's through business and it's through referrals. And whilst that works and has worked, the landscape has also shifted. If you're a newer consultant and you're thinking, I don't have those networks, I don't have those people who are recommending me, I'm not in those circles, then it can feel very challenging. But we can use that and we can turn that to your advantage, right? So the traditional methods alone aren't enough, right? Clients are more skeptical, they're more discerning, right? And they are, excuse me, self-educating. And they want to feel, especially premium buyers, they want to feel certainty before committing, right? So it's not just enough to get the referral, but they want to know that you are the right person to do that. And, that's one of the things that I want to really kind of emphasize today about how you can do that without them ever actually having a conversation with you, right? So it's not just who you know, right? Because that's always been the way, it's like who you know. And that whilst that is still an important part, it's who knows what you do and your ability to clearly communicate the value, right? So who knows what you do? And, and I'm sure if you asked friends or family and they were like, say, did you do? And they come back and they go, well, I think, if there's any level of ambiguity about what it is that you do, that's a clear sign that it's not as clear as it could be, okay? And there are three core areas where most consultants kind of like fall down when it comes to premium clients, okay? And that's what I want to talk you through today. Is I want to talk you through each one and the shift that you need to make so you can attract those high value clients consistently and keep them coming back as well. And I'm going to show this with kind of like the theory, but also in the form of a case study to show you exactly how you can apply this in your own business. So the first piece of this is really around the attraction. Okay, so how do you attract people in? And the problem that I see with this is vague positioning. Okay, and let me know in the chat box if you can resonate with what I'm saying, and you kind of go, yes, I can see where I can improve on this, right? Because sometimes it's hard to kind of look at yourself and like kind of put a mirror up and go, okay, am I doing this as well as I could be doing? Am I as clear as I could be doing? Okay. So when you think about vague positioning, right, I always think that, is it clear your place in the market? Like, is it clear what it is that you do? Okay. Because if your messaging is unclear or it's too broad, right, you get lost in the crowd. And that's just the truth of it. You blend in, there's nothing that's making you stand out, right? And messaging is such an important part of the way that you show up in the world. And really messaging is woven into everything that you do, every email that you send, every presentation you do, every pitch that you do, every coffee conversation that you're having, right? Messaging is part of that. And if that's not clear, if it's too broad, maybe you're very jargon focused, and which can work to a certain extent. But remember this thing, right? As a consultant, you have the curse of too much knowledge, right? And what happens is we start talking about the problem and the solution from that perspective, your level of expertise, not necessarily where your potential client is. And so, I think, if you remember when you were back in school or in any situation really where somebody's saying something, but you don't want to say that you don't understand. And you're like, oh, I can't say that because then they're going to think I'm stupid, right? So you never want to make your client feel like they're not understanding and they must be stupid, right? So this is where your messaging has to really do the heavy lifting. If you want people to be magnetized to you, if you want those messages coming through on LinkedIn where people say, I'm really interested in what you're doing, this is where it's going to really matter. So your messaging has to be clear and specific. So I remember when I started in business back in 2012, and I remember, you could be a little bit more general, you could be a little bit more broader, but as time has gone on, and obviously there's a lot more competition, a lot more people out there who are consultants and coaches, experts. And what you want to be focusing in on is, what are you a specialist in, right? And hyper focusing on that is going to make you stand out, right? This is going to stop you from sounding like everyone else. And that's really the thing. I always think back to like the you know, the cop shows that you might have seen when you were kids, and you know, when they'd have like a lineup of 10 people and one of them is the bad guy, and you know, the victim stands there and they're like, okay, that's the guy that robbed me. Imagine if there's 10 of you standing in a line and your client is looking at them going, which one are we going to choose? This is what it comes down to. It's like, what's going to make you stand out? And when your client can't see the value of what you're offering because what you're offering is too broad or it's vague, then they're not going to invest. And this is really important, especially when it comes to premium clients, because if they're spending a significant, substantial investment, they want to know exactly what they're going to get. And that's why your messaging has to absolutely be on point for what they need. Okay. So this is the first shift that we want to make. It's what I call message to market match. And this is where you become the obvious choice, not just another option, but they're like, I really want to work with that person. I really, really want to work with that company, right? Because they are experts in this. And I promise you, you will find that you'll secure, I suppose, your revenue when you are more specialist, because people are like, they do this so well. They're not trying to be all things to all people. You're not trying to talk to all these different industries. You know, you're becoming the obvious choice, right? And this is the way that you do that. You get really clear on who you serve, what you do, like what problem you solve, and what is the outcome. So I had a client yesterday asking the question around, I'm running a retreat in 2026. What should I, you know, like, what do you think we should include in that? And I said, but what's the point of the retreat? I said, there's no point doing something if there's no clear outcome. And especially for premium clients, they want to know what the outcome is. Not that there's going to be, we're going to work together for 6 months, or we're going to have these strategy days or anything like that. They're all the logistical elements. What they want to know is, what am I going to walk away with? Right? And this is so important, because that is the hook. That's going to be the thing that makes them think, oh, yeah, absolutely, I want that result, right? So let's do a little mini exercise. Are you up for that? Let me know if you're up for that. A little exercise, right? Great.
Sure.
Okay, so one sentence positioning, right? So I want you to think about, how do you say this? You know, so if you were standing up in front of a group of people, or you know, anybody really, when you think about how you're going to introduce yourself, and you think, okay, so this is how I would introduce myself, and you go, I help. Who do you help, right? With the specific problem you solve, so they can, right? So if you think about, so if I just use one of my examples, it's like, you know, sometimes I say, like, I talk about, I help coaches and consultants and solopreneurs who struggle with a lack of time, right? So that's the problem that I'm solving, right? So I help them to attract premium clients and work fewer hours, right? So they're kind of going, oh, I want to attract premium clients. They're going to pay me more and I get to work fewer hours. So they're like hooked into that, and they're going, yes, I really want that. And so I want you to think about what it would be for you. And if you struggle with this, and that's a really good sign as well, that that's the thing that you kind of just want to work on to make sure that you're really clear. And if you've ever been to, you know, those networking events where they say, oh, you know, stand up and give us your 30-second elevator speech, and you're like, oh, and you use lots of words and you keep talking, and you're like, and this is what I also do this, and I also do this, and I also do this. If you have a very clear elevator pitch, which is not, it's nothing new, but when you're really clear on what it is that you do, the problem you solve, and who you solve it for, and you're really clear on the outcome that someone's going to get, or the company is going to get, that is going to put you front of mind, right? I always think that if I was to start back in my business, because when I started my business, I was absolutely rubbish at marketing and selling. I had no idea how to do any of these things. I thought I had an understanding of business, and then you start your own business and you think, oh, maybe not. You know, I always think that that's the thing that I would say to my younger self is, what's the problem you're solving? Who are you solving it for? What's the outcome that they're going to get? And that is going to help to really anchor you and really set you apart and help your messaging to be a lot more magnetic. Okay. And this is exactly what I've been doing with my client, Sarah. She is an accountant, and she coaches people. And she was she was kind of kept talking about herself as being a consultant and a coach, and I'm going to help you through transitions, but it was very, very vague. And so what I was saying to her was like, you deal with people in very specific situations. For example, if they want to merge with another company or they want to sell, right? And I said, so the more you hone in on that, you're not going to be talking to the person who is like, I want to scale my business to whatever. You're talking about the person who wants to maybe merge or sell, right? That's it. Because then that acts as a filter as well. Because if somebody's not interested in either of those two things, then they're not interested. They're going to be like, oh, that's not for me. And you want that with your messaging. You want that. You want someone to say, that's not for me. That's a good thing. Okay. The second area that we're looking at is converting them. Okay. And this is where the problem is, where you get dependent on referrals. Okay. And it works to a certain point, but because it is unpredictable, that's the piece that you want to be really mindful of, is that its unpredictability is not helping you. Okay. That leads to those feast or famine cycles. You don't have any control over the leads. You're kind of like sitting there going, I wonder if anything's going to come through today. And the truth is, your premium clients aren't always in those circles. It's difficult. You're kind of thinking, I'm just relying on these referrals, but is that actually my dream client? Is that my ideal client? Is that my ideal company that I want to work with? Okay. So what you do instead of waiting for those leads to come through and waiting for word of mouth to work its magic, and it is magic, but you also don't want to rely on it, you do what I call authority-led attraction. Okay. And this is where you have a small intentional digital presence, right? So you think about LinkedIn, you think about social media, maybe there's you have a LinkedIn newsletter. But what that means is that if somebody is interested in working with you, right? Say, for example, Patrick refers one of you and just like, oh, you need to talk to Una. And so they go, oh, okay, we'll talk to Una. This day and age, they're not going to go straight to Una, right? They're going to go and see, we're going to check them out first. We're going to do our due diligence. So they're going to Google you probably. They're going to go on LinkedIn. They're going to check out what kind of a presence you have. And this is where your messaging does its heavy lifting for you, because they'll be like, oh, I love this. Oh, and she's got this newsletter, and they're going to consume your content. Think of yourself like almost like a Netflix series where they're like, oh, that was a really interesting blog. Oh, that's a really interesting blog. And they just keep reading or watching your videos or listening to your podcast or whatever it might be. But what they're getting is a really strong sense of who you are and how you can help them, right? So what you're doing is, when you're building that digital presence, what I call the digital breadcrumb trail, if you remember the Hansel and Gretel story, and you're like dropping the little breadcrumbs, they're going to follow those breadcrumbs, come back to you and go, right, okay, your content, your assets have actually built a lot of trust before you even had a conversation with them, right? When you share your expertise and you do it in a way that activates your dream client, they're going to be so much more quicker to come to you and say, let's talk about how we can work together, rather than you having to convince them, right? Because nobody wants to be in that convincing energy. It's like, oh, pick me, pick me. We don't want that. We want someone to actually go, actually, do you know what? I've looked at what you've got out there. I was really interested in that white paper that you did. They want to know more, right? And they've picked you, really. And this is where you use those authority assets to pre-sell. So like your blog, your podcast, your videos, whatever it might be. And it might just be a series of white papers. It just depends. But if you have nothing, then they've nothing to get their teeth into. And the problem is that if you've got, and everyone's got competitors, but your competitors probably have some kind of assets, and they're going to go and consume that content, and they're potentially going to go and work with that person. Okay. So this is an example of how you can actually implement this. So I've been working with a client for the last 6 months. Misha, she is actually a very senior director in a consulting firm, but she has always known that she wanted to go out by herself. And so we've been preparing for that. So she wasn't able to visibly market, but she's able to kind of create a lot of authority assets. So for when she's ready to launch, and she's ready to launch next month. And we've got all of these assets that are already lined up. And she's been doing kind of like, behind the scenes work. So now she's getting invitations for people to come on their podcast. to actually share her methodology, to share her philosophy, to really share what she helps her clients to do. And she has a very tight message. She knows exactly who she's working with. She knows exactly the problem that she's solving. And she's now really well positioned to attract premium clients. And we designed it that way. Okay. And so here's the question for you. Like, where can someone see your value before they ever speak to you? Right. And that was one of the reasons why I wrote my book. I wrote my book, Tiny Time, Big Results. Oh, you can't see that. It's all blurry. Tiny Time, Big Results. I wrote that in 2018. And the reason why I wrote that was I thought this is like the best business card ever, because someone could just pick up the book and go, right, I'm going to read this. I'm going to get a really strong sense of who Yasmin is, her story, and her methodology. And so this is what you want, is you want people to be able to see your value before they ever speak to you. Then the third piece of this is retain. So where you've got the issue of one and done clients. So you've got like, they're on one project and then they go, and then you're like, okay, now I've got to find the next one. And this can be a real challenge, right? So when you are thinking about, the fact that they get the result, they disappear, and then there's no engagement or there's no journey beyond that, what we want to do is we want to create that retainable transformation, okay? And the way that I look at this is there are 3 ways that you can make money in your business, right? Just check there. So 3 ways that you can make money in your business, right? So the first is getting new clients, right? Which is typically what most businesses focusing on, is getting more clients, right? The second is increasing the value of the transaction, right? So charging more. Then the third is increasing the frequency of how often they spend with you, right? And so this is what I want you to be thinking about, is how can I get them to spend more frequently, okay? So what I'm thinking of, and when I'm working with my clients, I'm thinking, okay, so what's your signature framework? Like, what is it that you do? What's your trademark transformation that you help people to achieve, right? And when you think about that, you're not going to solve all of their problems in one go, right? And you want to be very deliberate and methodical about how they work with you, the problems you solve, and then kind of go, right, okay, so now we work on this, now we work on this, right? Thinking about how you onboard and setting expectations, especially when from a consulting perspective, you don't want them to think that you're going to solve like every single problem and everything is going to be hunky-dory. You want to really set those expectations, right? And clients stay longer when they see the next level with you. And that's a really important piece of it, because you're building this really strong relationship. And if you've got a really good understanding of their business, then they're going to want to stay with you, especially when they get results, and they'll be like, well, why would I go to anybody else? Because you understand me, you get me. And I also know that you have a very clear methodology about how this works. Okay. So I thought I'd use myself as a case study. So I hope that's okay. And so the way that I've set my business up is that I solve very specific problems for my clients. But what happens is when they've gotten the result, then they're able to kind of go, right, okay, so I have this other issue and I have this other issue, right? And what I will say here is this isn't always about a consulting package or a consulting program. It could be that you have digital offers that you're able to say to, somebody's like, okay, well, this problem will, I can solve this problem, and it's going to be this digital download, right? So what you're doing as a consultant is you haven't got all your eggs in one basket, right? It's not only about the consulting, but you're also thinking about how else can I generate revenue in my business? Your client might be like, well, I don't want to sign up for another consulting package, but I also have this other issue. And you go, well, I have a course for that, a program for that, something smaller, a book, whatever it might be. So I want you to be thinking about that rather than that client coming and going and they go, right, okay, that's done. How do you keep them in your ecosystem? How do you keep them in there and they're like kind of just swimming around and going, oh, this is great. I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll take that. Right. And this really requires you thinking about your business in a broader sense, because, when one of the philosophies of Tiny Time Big Results is all that leverage, so you can't always be exchanging your time for money. It's really about exchanging value. So when you can create value in different packages, then that really makes your business so much more sustainable, and it makes your income so much more consistent as well. Okay. So ask yourself this question: what transformation do clients stay for beyond the first win? Okay. What transformation do clients stay for beyond the first win? Okay. Okay. How are we doing for time, Patrick? Are we okay?
Yeah, we're doing absolutely fine. You're spot on.
Perfect. So I've got 3 wins quick wins that you can implement today. That's what I want to share with you, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. Okay. So
Super.
3 quick wins you can implement today. So firstly, rewrite your LinkedIn headline if you feel like it does not position you powerfully in your marketplace. Okay. So I'll give you an example here. Helping private healthcare clinics streamline operations and boost patient outcomes is far more powerful than healthcare consultant. Can you see the difference? Like for me, I'm like looking at that going, if I was a private healthcare clinic, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's really interesting, because they've been very specific about what they're doing, rather than a healthcare consultant. I'll be like, I don't know what that means. Is that the right person for me? I don't know. So I want you to think about how you're writing your LinkedIn headline. And here's the thing that I would always encourage you to think about from a headline perspective, that, when if you're commenting on LinkedIn on other people's posts, think about those first few words that people see, because they're not going to see your full headline unless they go into your profile. But if they go into a comment and they see your, the first 5, 7 words, maybe even less than that, what are they seeing? And that's the bit where you really want to grab their attention, because that's going to be the thing that makes them think, oh, this is interesting. Even if it's just interesting, then they go back to your profile, and this is where you think about the digital breadcrumb trail. So if, for example, if you went on my LinkedIn profile, you'd see, okay, here's Yasmin, and I have a link because I'm running an event in December called the Profitable Expert. So you could click on that link. And what I'm doing is I'm giving you like the next step, like this is what you do next, right? So think about your LinkedIn headline. How can you position yourself powerfully in the marketplace? Thinking about what we've talked about around, your messaging, this is going to do the heavy lifting for you, okay? Second thing I want you to think about is turn one testimonial into a story post that builds trust, right? And what you typically see is, somebody gets a good review and they go, great, look at this. I got this great review from, Column, and you go, great, okay, perfect. However, if you were to take that testimonial and break it down into, why did Column come and work with this company? What was the before? What was the after? Right? How they got the result? And you demonstrate that you're the one that helped them get the result, that is going to be the thing that actually helps you to build authority. So don't just take a review and just slap it up on your social media or on your website. Turn that into a case study. You might get like an amazing testimonial, and there's so much in it that people don't they skim read it. So your job is to take it and go, right, okay, maybe there's 5 different posts that I can take out of that one review that is going to do more for you than actually just posting it. Okay. That's one thing that you can do. Create one flagship idea post to show your expertise, right? This is really, really powerful, because the more you can differentiate yourself from other consultants in the same space, in the same industry, this is going to literally just make you stand out rather than blending in. So pick one key concept, framework, or belief that you stand for, and turn it into a bold post that positions you as the go-to. So I'll give you an example there. Fixing the process is only one step. We build systems that stay fixed. If you're a lean consultant, you might use an example like that. But what you're doing is you're showing people that you have a methodology. And this is really important, because a lot of times consultants say, well, it depends on what the client needs. But if you're clear on who you work with, the problem you solve, and the outcome that you help them to achieve, then I'm betting that there is a way that you help them to achieve that outcome. You have a process. That process is your trademark transformation. And you take them through that process to achieve that result. That is your wealth anchor. That is what your whole business is based on, right? And this gives you so much more flexibility, but it also gives you so much more profit. What's the word I'm looking for? Profit potential. That's what I'm looking for, profit potential, because you become known for that transformation and they're just like, oh my God. Like, so my kind of like work in Tiny Time Big Results has been all around how you build that profitable 20-hour week business. That's what I want to be known for. That's a really great question that you can ask yourself. It's like, what do I want to be known for? Okay. So if this is the kind of strategy and structure you need, this is what I do inside my packages and programs. Feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn and we can have a conversation. That's absolutely fine. I've got a free guide called the 5 Essential Assets for Coaches and Consultants. So you can go to my website, yasminvorajee.com/5 assets. So it's the number 5. And if you want to know how to implement this in your business and you'd like to have a conversation, then feel free to use the QR code and you can book a session in with me. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure sharing this with you, and I'll open it up to some questions.
Yasmin, that was really powerful, and thank you so much. I mean, I could listen to you all day. It speaks to the soul of what we do in terms of, I suppose, communicating effectively with our potential clients and retaining them. One of the questions we're getting a lot of queries in on at the moment is in regard to, I suppose, what best tools you might consider using, particularly with the advent of AI, for example, which really levels the playing field for a lot of consultants in this space. So within that context, I mean, what are you using at the moment?
Okay, so from a tools perspective, I use so when I think of tools and I'm
Yeah,
thinking of like, and I keep my business very lean, right? Maybe that's why I use the lean consultant expert example, because I like to keep my costs low so that my profitability is high. So I use very simple tools like Zoom. That Zoom is kind of like my go-to
sure,
for all my
sure.
events and my
Yeah,
meetings and things like that. The main system that I use for my database, my email database. So, when you think about your email list, if you're building an email list, everyone should be building an email list. All the places where my automations happen. So, for example, if you were to go to yasminvorajee.com/5 assets and you sign up for that free guide, you will then get a series of emails that are automated, right, over a
okay.
period of time, right? So, and what that means is I'm building relationships with people on a daily basis. Every time somebody signs up for anything in my world, they get a series of communications from me. And so whether 100 people hit my website or 1,000 or more, I'm building the same type of relationships. I'm able to do that at scale, right?
Wow. Okay.
And that's really powerful. And it's so simple to do, but a lot of people don't do it, right? So I
That-
use a system. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, no, that's actually very insightful and very helpful. So sorry, I cut across you. You're using which system?
So I use a system called Gold Star Pro,
Okay.
right? And it's an absolutely fantastic system. Like, so I've been using email autoresponders and databases and since I started. And this one has so much functionality in it. It's brilliant. But also with some of the functionality, like I don't use all of it. I use what I need and it's user friendly, it's intuitive. So that's one. I use Thrivecart for checkout, So when I use the
Okay.
example of like the ecosystem, like, so I have mini courses. I'm a qualified hypnotherapist as well. So I have hypnosis tracks that I sell. I do all of that through a system called Thrivecart.
THRIVE cart.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now,
Okay.
Gold Star Pro actually has a checkout functionality. But when I switched over to Gold Star Pro, I already had everything built in Thrivecart.
Of course. Yeah.
So I did not want to make the move. I just knitted the two together. But you can just use Gold Star Pro, for
And
all of that.
in the context of LinkedIn, we get this query a lot from the SME space members and so on, is, they're actually moving to a space now where websites have almost become, I won't say redundant, but they are shop windows to a certain degree, that people are moving over all their kind of, I suppose, horsepower, for want of a better word, over onto LinkedIn. What's your
Mhm.
view on that balance, or where would you be doing most of your footprint?
I would definitely say don't do that. That's just my own personal belief because platforms do not belong to us, right? And I think it's very dangerous to build your infrastructure on something that does not belong to you. So
Okay,
I
good
would
point.
always say have a website, even if it's just like a one-page website. I remember working with a client and she had no business when we first started. And for a year, she just had one homepage and it was just geared to getting people to sign up for her free guide, right? What that meant was she had a presence, She was building her email list, which is again another asset that belongs to you. So I had a good friend of mine earlier this year. She had built her Instagram following to like 30,000 plus followers. Overnight, they shut her down and she was never able to get those back. Right.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And and then I heard of another friend who had nearly 500,000 followers on Instagram and they shut her down. And, when you just think, oh my God, that is just terrifying because all of the stuff that you've built up, all of that,
Yes, yeah, that makes
it's,
perfect sense.
yeah. So for me, I would say have your website. Um, and for me, I think about, if you, sometimes people struggle with thinking like, I don't want to have to write a blog every week. I don't want to have to do all of this. It feels like there's a lot that you have to do every single week. And so I would like create cornerstone content. Like if you had 5 blogs that really spoke to the heart of what you do, right? And so if somebody landed on your website, and I always think of this as an example of like, what I was saying in the presentation around, become like a Netflix series. It's like I suddenly discover Patrick. I go onto his website and I read his blog. Somebody comes into my world, they go, oh, she's got a book. I'm going to read her book. Oh, she's got a podcast. I've got over 100 episodes on my podcast. So they can binge consume my content. There's easily, I don't know, 10, 20 hours worth of content. And they're
Sure.
going to know by that whether they want to come and work with me or not.
Okay. Now that makes perfect sense. But I'm conscious it's not me that people want to listen to. So I'm just curious if any of the people that are attending, and I'm also cognizant of a lot of people who have logged on and will be listening to this post the event when we put it up on our various social media platforms that may come back to you for questions supplementary. But
Sure.
as anyone here attending, any final questions for Yasmin, who's been so kind to give us her time that they want to, there's a burning platform that they want to embrace for this moment that the opportunity presents itself?
I can see Clive has a question in the
Yeah,
chat.
I put it in there, guys. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Jasmine. Brilliant uh, seminar there, chat, should I say. My question is, yeah, I'm thinking of starting up a new company. And as a startup company, would you advise me to go for the premium client first or build up a reputation for using other clients and then go for the premium client?
Okay. So one of the mistakes that I made when I started my business is even though I'd had like this corporate career, I kind of shut the door on it all and pretended that didn't exist. And I kind of acted as if I was a complete novice and a startup. So I don't know what your business is, Clive, and whether you have experience in the industry beforehand. What I would say is that you have a lot of experience and expertise and whatever your business is, unless is this like a new business, like really new to you?
The business will be new, but the experience is years.
Okay, so then therefore the answer is I would absolutely go for those premium clients and for a couple of reasons. Okay, so firstly, what I found in my business is that when I was when my strategy of attracting premium clients, it meant I only had to work with a handful of clients, and I was making, I make decent money. And whilst I was raising my babies, that was a really important thing for me, right? And so it means then that you're kind of in your mind, you're not thinking that I've got to go and market to the masses. You become a lot more focused with your marketing, right? So then you're kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to go and have some coffee conversations. I'm going to see who I can collaborate with, so it makes your marketing a lot more tighter. And also I would just be thinking that don't discount your expertise. Like if you're amazing at what you do, charge accordingly. This isn't about charging your worth because you're priceless, right? So we don't talk about it in that respect. We talk about what the work is worth. Like what's the value of what you do to the company that you're going to work with? Like when I work with my clients, I know from my experience is that the work I do is at least 5-10 times ROI. I know they're going to get an ROI of 5-10 times easily. And I can say that with complete confidence because I've seen it, right? So it's about the value of the work. So if you're looking at it and going, this is actually amazing, and the result that they're going to be able to achieve, therefore you should charge accordingly. So even if it's a startup, because that, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, like when you've got money flowing in, it gives you space to be more creative. It gives you space to feel more expansive. And that can only be a good thing. Does
Okay.
that answer your question, Clive?
Yeah, perfect. Great. Thank you, Yasmin.
Yasmin, we could talk about this all afternoon, and we may indeed impose on you to come back another time, such as can fit into your diary if you're amenable.
No, I'd love to, yeah.
It's opening up a whole Pandora's box of questions for us, I'm sure. But we made a promise and we made a commitment, and the witching hour approaches, so we said we give people some time for sustenance. So, accord you galéir gur míle maith and Yasmin, deep appreciation. And thank you so much. It's been a meaningful and certainly kind of insightful conversation. And we wish you all the best in the future. And we look forward to seeing you again. Slán go
Thank you
fóill,
so much.
Carrick, and we'll talk to you again. And look out for the next one that's coming up later in the month with Joe on the 20th of November in regard to AI. Bye bye, everybody. And thank you once again.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.